please welcome the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Honorable Robert McDonnell. Governor.
Thank you, Dr. Steger, and good evening, members of the Virginia Tech community, especially you great students. I'm delighted to be here tonight as you remember those 32 families whose lives were changed forever that day, as well as the other 25 who suffered injuries on April 16th of 2007. With me tonight are our Chief of Staff, Martin Kent, our Secretary of Education, Laura Fornash, who came from Virginia Tech, our Secretary of Public Safety, Marla Decker, and one of the men who helped to lead the investigation afterwards, along with Chief Flincham, our Superintendent of State Police, Colonel Steve Flaherty. Could it really be 5 years now? This is one of those events where everybody remembers what they were doing, where they were, how they felt, what they were thinking on that cold Monday morning of April 16, 2007, a day very much unlike this tranquil, spring-like day here in Blacksburg today. I remember as the news continued to pour in about how devastating this event was, that sinking feeling in my stomach that I'm sure many of you felt as well as you looked at the images over the television or experienced it here on campus and just were struck with the magnitude of this calamity. I don't think any of us will forget the incredible bravery of the Virginia Tech Campus Police, the Virginia State Police, the town of Blacksburg Police, the FBI, the first responders, all of whom arrived on the scene to do everything that they could to get answers quickly and begin to care for those that were injured. The local hospitals all rallying together and doing extraordinary things to provide immediate care for those who were in need. I'll never forget that next day with the rally here at Virginia Tech with students leading the way, words of comfort from President Bush, my predecessor Tim Kaine returning 24 hours on a flight from Japan, delivering inspirational remarks to the student body, and then at the end of that ceremony, incredible uplifting words from Professor Nikki Giovanni to remind us that on that day around Virginia and around the world, we were all Hokies. Dr. Steger, I remember just that Thursday, a couple days after that, visiting some of those families at the hospital and beginning to work with you to try to begin to answer some of the questions that all of you had here at Virginia Tech during those 3 days. Why? What purpose? How could this happen? And so here we are 5 years later, and there are many questions that we still can't answer, perhaps some of those answers known only to God. Why? Why here? Why these 32? Why those additional 25? But what we do know is some things with great certainty, and that is the incredible love, compassion, and concern of the Virginia Tech community, and in fact of all Virginians as they rallied behind those families in this community during its time of mourning and stricken with grief. We know that foundations sprung up, that alumni poured in money, that faculty mentored and cared for students, but most of all that you students cared for one another with measured words and tears that you shared with one another and prayers to try to make some sense out of the calamity that happened that day. We also know that we have a renewed call to follow that great golden rule that's been a hallmark of America now for these 2 centuries, to do unto others as we would have them do unto you. That's a hallmark of our great country, and that's what we saw in those days and hours and months and years after the April 16, 2007 tragedy here at Virginia Tech, as you did exactly that and continue to do that, not just for your fellow Hokies, but for your fellow Virginians. It's part and parcel of who we are as Americans, and if we're going to continue to be a great and mighty nation, we must continue to follow that golden rule. And thirdly, we have learned since that fateful day in 2007 that we are an incredibly resilient people. That there are things that happen in our lives that we truly cannot explain. The proverbial question, why do bad things happen to good people, we will never fully be able to answer. But what we do know is through the tragedies that occur, that we have a duty to find our way through those, to help our neighbor, to persevere, to learn from the things that happen, to make changes in policy, to improve the way we deal with one another, to be kinder and more compassionate and more gentle to our neighbor, to embrace a culture of life and compassion and healing and outreach and understanding between students and faculty and the broader community. And you've done that in an extraordinary way. And so, while there are questions that still may remain, I want to say that what you are doing here tonight, in this moment of remembrance, you've chosen not to curse the darkness, but you've chosen to light a candle. That reflects, I believe, the greatness of this community and the greatness of our state. So let us all embrace one another, perhaps a little closer than when you got here tonight. Let us do a little bit more to usher in a greater understanding of each other, to celebrate our differences as we have for these several centuries of our republic. And as we leave here, and as you approach graduation, and I'm going to be delighted to be back in just a couple weeks as my daughter graduates from this great university, I think the cry tonight is the same one that it was 5 years ago, and that is being together, remembering the 57 families that were changed forever. But once again today,